There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Schaff. The program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and here by the grace of God. You've heard me reference in the past Don McElvaney. I have known him for some 40 years. I've served on the board of a conservative group with him. Have done business with him. I have followed him in his research and know, number one, he's a Christian. Number two, he's pretty doggone smart and a pretty good guy on the market. And he looks at something that I want to cover with you today. I got this past week, and I'm going to be referencing from it. The name of the article that he sent me was Understanding the Political Left's Takedown Strategy for America. America's Engineered Moral Collapse. I'm going to be referencing this article throughout today's broadcast. Recently, a homosexual high school teacher in New Jersey was arrested for soliciting sex from one of his underage male students. That same day, it was announced that the Washington, D.C. City Council was pushing to legalize prostitution for underage youth. Now, what do these stories have in common? They both represent just another day in America. Our sad reality is that a day does not go by when children, grades kindergarten through 12 and certainly through college, that they're not openly brainwashed and exploited by the LGBTQ perverts, those that are obsessed with destroying the innocence of kids by indoctrinating them into sexual deviancy. Whether it's propagandizing children into thinking that they can be any gender they wish, or instructing them in the ways of oral and anal sex, some of the most morally depraved people are now holding positions of power and influence in America today. This is in the public schools and the universities, as well as our state and federal government. Ethan Huff recently wrote in Natural News, while America was once a bastion of goodness and decency in the world, a nation Ronald Reagan called a shining city on a hill, and a beacon of light that guides freedom-loving people everywhere, today it is increasingly becoming a land of perversion and total moral depravity. Everywhere you look these days, it's pride parades smothered in gay rainbow flags, pro-abortion marches led by loudmouth feminists, and drag queen story hours that aim to transify our children. A business choosing to bake wedding cakes exclusively for normal people is considered to be evil and bigoted in today's America, while dressing up an 11-year-old boy in whorish clothing and exploiting him for money on the social media is brave and intolerant. Being a Christian in America today means that you're completely narrow-minded, you're bigoted, and deserving of ridicule, while forcing a 7-year-old boy to transition into a girl with puberty blockers. That's seen as progressive. It's a good way to let the kids express themselves without hate, they try to tell us. Homosexual boys, now calling themselves girls, are allowed to compete in sports against normal straight girls. To object openly to these perversions is labeled by the controlled media and the political left as hate, intolerance, or Christian bigotry. Teachers can be fired if they in any way offend trans students or treat or speak of girls as girls or boys as boys, or if they say that only a woman can give birth to a baby. Girls in high school and college sports are now being forced to compete against trans women, those who are actually transgender or homosexual men who are calling themselves girls. This is all being pushed nonstop by the political left and the Democrats. Everything is being turned completely upside down, folks. And where is the national outcry against this insanity? Sadly, the great majority of Americans are sleepwalking through it all. They are, folks, and it is tragic. It is tragic. Target is a leading corporate advocate of the transgender movement. They're also catering to the transgender movement by opening up their female restrooms to gay men who call themselves women. You know, transgenders. Target recently contributed $100,000 to one of the largest transgender advocacy groups, Gleason, Glesen, which promotes itself as the, quote, leading national educational organization focused on ensuring safe and affirming schools for LGBTQ students. Gleason is promoting gender-neutral pronouns and ideology in schools and governments, local, state, and federal. All across America, this is going on and around the world, as well as in the media and in Hollywood. Gleason admits that on its website that it heavily lobbies Congress on behalf of the transgender movement, as well as the Department of Education, to get the transgender agenda curriculum in public schools across our country. Target's chief marketing officer is on the board of Gleason. That's part of the reason it helps to explain Target's promotion of the gay, lesbian, transgender agenda. Target also carries lines of student clothing designed for gays, lesbians, and transgenders. One line of t-shirts is for children of gay and lesbian couples only. The front of the t-shirts read, and I quote, "I love my dads," plural, or "I love my moms," plural. How sick and disgusting of Targets. They're not the only ally of Gleason or corporate advocate and financial supporter of the gay, lesbian, transgender movement. Other big companies that are financial and ideological supporters of this evil, perverted movement include Walt Disney, Delta, J.P. Morgan Chase, HBO, the NBA, McDonald's, AT&T, Morgan Stanley, Gucci, Bloomberg News, Colgate-Palmolive, many, many more. If millions of people would boycott Target and these other trans movement supporters, it might send them a much-needed message. But folks, don't hold your breath, because the sad fact is that most Americans don't care. Texas school district mandated a transgender education for an 8-year-old boy. The Austin, Texas school district, this is Texas. This isn't California or New York. This is Texas, a school district there. The board unanimously approved a proposal to introduce transgender education for children as young as 8 years old. The Austin Independent School District rubber-stamped the new curriculum. For the first time, we'll see students talk about gender identity and sexual orientation. Radio station KXAN reported, and I quote, "The lessons will also help kids identify an adult they can trust, plus talk to them about options if they get pregnant, and 7th graders would learn how to use a condom. The curriculum is being described as, quote, controversial, given that it will teach children as young as 8 about gay anal sex and transgender identities." Just think about it, folks. In Texas, pro-trans doctors now prescribe puberty blockers to trans children. The transgender agenda dictates that all children who express gender dysphoria or a trans identity, that is, they want to change their sex gender, that they should immediately be put on puberty blockers. Parents who refuse to allow their children to pollute their developing bodies with these questionable drugs are scorned and labeled as abusive, transphobic trash. In some cases, parents may even end up losing their children altogether. Refusing to buy into the trans agenda, even when you believe it's not in your child's best interest, is all it takes these days to be labeled a bad parent. That's true, folks. Some healthcare providers are providing puberty blockers to kids as young as 11 years old. Doctors say that this practice gives children experience gender dysphoria time to figure out their identity. What a messed up society we're in. How did we get here, folks? Well, Antonio Gramsci, he was the founder of the Italian Communist Party. He told Lenin and Stalin that they would never take America by storming the bastions. That means through a violent revolution. Like the Bolsheviks took Russia. He said America must first be weakened by destroying its morality, its patriotism, and spiritual life. First, its entire culture must be gradually undermined and destroyed. A few decades later, a brilliant but totally evil communist strategist, Saul Alinsky, came along and helped develop and implement that strategy here in America. Alinsky wrote a book titled Rules for Radicals that articulated that agenda. The book he dedicated to Lucifer, that's right, to Satan. Well, listen to this, folks. Alinsky was a personal mentor to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Let me repeat that. Alinsky, whose book, Rules for Radicals, articulated the agenda of a book, dedicated it to the devil, and he was the personal mentor or teacher to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Note this: Obama's only job prior to being elevated by the deep state establishment to the U.S. Senate and later president was working as an organizer for Alinsky's Chicago-based Communist Front, the Industrial Areas Foundation. Today, that strategy is gradually collapsing the morality of America, and it's virtually an accomplished fact. Patient gradualism was the key to the political left undermining, collapsing, and destroying the once great American culture, and most Americans never even saw it happening. You know, kind of like the frog slowly boiling in the water. Next, folks, next to go will be our freedom. If you think this is an exaggeration, take a look around. Do you see most men being men anymore? Do you see most women being women anymore? Do you see children being children anymore? Can you believe the incredible insanity and evil that was just described to you? And this is now spreading largely unopposed across America. None of it was by accident. It was carefully planned and implemented by the political left and the globalists. This evil agenda is almost entirely taking over our country. The leftist-controlled school system, the media and entertainment industry, and the government, they've all successfully dumbed down and even put to sleep the great majority of Americans over the past 50 years or so. This to the extent that most neither recognize the evil or lift a finger to fight back against it. Yet people are still voting and foolishly putting their faith in politicians to save them, even though almost none of the politicians, Democrat or Republican, left or right, ever actually does anything of worth to stop the insanity. Instead, most of them are actually facilitating its progressivism by pretending to oppose one another in this measure. Blue versus red, psychops known as American politics. When was the last time a civil servant actually took an aggressive stand for what's right? Where are the Jesse Helms of yesterday, principled leaders that stood for what was right? When was the last time a politician on either side of the aisle said enough is enough to the continued onslaught of the LGBTQ insanity? As most Americans spend their time buried in their electronic devices, our nation continues to swirl the toilet as our children are being destroyed. And now the political left, sensing victory almost within their grasp, is dramatically accelerating their strategy, which is now very much out in the open. Even with Donald Trump at the helm, many Americans appear to be under the delusion that everything is going to be just fine in the end, and they don't have to lift a finger to actually save this republic. The sad truth is that nothing could be further from the truth. If Americans really care about saving this country from this moral, cultural war from within, then they're going to have to start making some sacrifices by joining in on the fight. They got to start pushing back with the intent to actually stop this insane evil. Is it possible the political left is now pushing their evil insanity so hard and fast that thinking Americans, a dying breed we are, that we'll wake up to the fact that we're being destroyed from within by this great evil? Maybe, or maybe not. The future of our republic hangs in the balance, and it may already be too late to save it. But folks, we should at least try. We should try to fight back. This is the time, right now. Turn off your television, terminate your Netflix subscription, turn off your smartphone and social media, and get involved in the battle. If you've got kids or grandkids, get them out of the public school system, also known as the brainwashing, dumbing down factory. Get them out now and start homeschooling them while it's still legal. The political left, also known as the Democrats, if they come to full political power in 20 or 24, they're going to make a major push to outlaw both homeschooling and gun ownership. And they will censor all free speech that opposes their agenda, and not just on the internet, as they're clearly doing today. It happened in Russia in 1917, it happened in Germany in 1933, and it's happening in America today. Do you remember the movie classic Network? I saw it. It was a patriotic and angry broadcaster who saw great evil rising in his day, and he inspired millions of Americans to wake up and fight back against this great and rising evil with the battle cry, quote, "We're mad as hell and we're going to do something about it. We're not going to take it anymore." Could that happen in our day? I don't know. Think about it and ask what you can do to fight back. And meanwhile, the socialist Democrats are working to establish a dictatorship right here in America, right now. America's political system is on a downward spiral from which we may never recover. Over 244 years, we've declined politically from a republic, that's with maximum freedom, to democracy, from democracy to fascism. Fascism is a marriage of big government and big business. Look at it today. And now to an approaching socialistic dictatorship from which we will not reemerge in most of our lifetimes. We're watching all of this emerge right before our eyes right now, folks. Democracy in America, as we think, we all understand it, is over. It's dead. It was destroyed by the leftist Democrats and the deep state that controls them. What will follow in either 20 or 24, unless there's a miraculous reversal, is a one-party socialist regime, a police state, and the end of freedom as we know it in America. Sadly, most Americans are sleeping through it all and doing little or nothing to push back. The Democrats are now completely controlled by the socialist deep state, along with the entire mainline media, illegally conspired to prevent Donald Trump's election in 2016. Hillary Clinton and the U.S. intelligence agencies, along with Barack Obama, were our major players in this conspiracy. After that effort failed with the surprise election of Trump, they started from day one to undermine his presidency and get him removed from office. They failed. Their failed Russian conspiracy was act number one. Their Ukraine conspiracy and impeachment were act number two. Leading Democrats have said if they fail to remove him from office and Trump is reelected, they will start from day one of his second term to launch new impeachment proceedings. Clearly, our government can't continue to function like this, nor could any free government. If the Democrats take complete control of the government in the November election, violence is likely to break out in the months that follow as the Democrats try to seize Americans' guns. But the deep state-controlled government is well organized, has all of the intelligence agencies on its side, much of the military, and all of the really big guns, plus the entire mainline media. Meanwhile, opposition to this evil emerging socialist juggernaut is not any better organized than the failed Tea Party or militia movements of recent decades. Democracy ends when two or more sides disagree on who runs the country, and they can't settle the question through an election because they don't even agree that elections are how you decide who's in charge. That, folks, is the basic issue here. Who decide who runs our country? When you hate each other but accept the election results, you have a country. When you stop accepting election results, you have anarchy, chaos, and a countdown to a dictatorship. As mentioned, the Mueller investigation was about removing Trump from office and overturning the results of an election. So were the Democrat impeachment efforts. We all know that. So what do the sure odds of the Democrats rejecting the next Republican president really mean? It means they don't accept the results of any election that they don't win. It means they don't believe that transfers of power in this country are determined by elections. The Democrats have rejected our system of government. This isn't just dissent. It's not disagreement. You can hate the other party. You can think that the worst thing that happened to our country, but then you work harder than ever to win the next election. But when you consistently reject the results of elections, the ones you don't win, what you want is a dictatorship, your own, very own dictatorship. The only legitimate exercise of power in this country, according to the Democrats, is its own. Whenever Republicans exercise power, it's inherently, quote, illegitimate. When the Democrats lost Congress, when they lost the White House, what do? They began trying to run our country through liberal federal judges and bureaucrats. Our system of government is based on the Constitution, but that's not the system that runs this country anymore. The Democrat system is that any part of the government that they run gets total and unlimited power over the country. If the Democrats are in the White House and the president can do anything, he can have his own amnesty for illegal aliens. He can fine you for not having health insurance. He can use the IRS as his own police force and imprison citizens who speak against him. He can provide guns and enemy and money. The guns, look at Fast and Furious. The money, look at the Iran nuclear deal. He can provide this to other countries to support his own agenda. And watch while one of America's ambassadors is dragged through the streets and murdered, did nothing to aid our citizens. The president's power is unlimited. He's a dictator. But when Republicans get into the White House, suddenly the president can't do anything. He isn't even allowed to undo the illegal alien amnesty that Obama illegally invented. A Democrat in the White House has discretion to completely decide every aspect of immigration policy. A Republican doesn't even have the discretion to reverse him. That's how the game's played. That's how our country's now being run. When a Democrat's in the White House, when he states that even when a Democrat is in the White House, states aren't even allowed to enforce immigration law. But when a Republican is in the White House, states can create their own immigration laws. Under Democrat Obama, a state was not allowed to do anything without asking permission. But under Republicans, a Republican Trump, Jerry Brown could go around saying that California is an independent republic and sign treaties with other countries. This is a dramatic contradiction to the United States Constitution. Whether it's federal or state, executive, legislative, or judiciary, the left moves power around to run the country. Study where California is headed to see if you want to see where the entire nation will be heading under the Democrats. Donald Trump has caused the deep state to come out of hiding. Professional government is like a fraternity or secret society. You can't serve in it if you're not a member. If you haven't been indoctrinated into its arcane rituals, if you aren't in the club, then you're not legitimate. And folks, as you well know, President Trump isn't in the club. Now we're seeing what the deep state-controlled government does when amateurs try to walk in on them. They spy on them, they investigate them, and then they send them to jail. They use the tools of power to bring them down. That, folks, is not a free country. It's not a free country when FBI agents who support Hillary take out an insurance policy against Trump winning the election. It's not a free country when Obama officials engage in massive spying on the illegal framing of the opposition. And it's not a free country when the media responds to the other guy's winning by trying to ban the conservative media that supported him from social media and the internet. It's not a free country when all of the above collude together to overturn an election because the guy who wasn't supposed to win did. Have no doubt, we are seeing the collapse of free democratic government America. Much of what has happened in the past 3 years to confirm the direction in which the Democrats and deep state are taking America, it's now out in the open. It's in our faces for everyone to see. Even if Trump should win the coming election, the battle for freedom in America, folks, is just now beginning. The year 2020 is America's moment of truth. We are at a major crossroads in our history. Either there is a great awakening and pushback starting now, or freedom in America will be lost for generations to come. And remember, when the lights of freedom go out in America, they go out around the world. When your grandchildren ask you someday what you did to fight back in 2020 against this great evil, what are you going to say? Think about it and get seriously involved in the coming election, folks, in your town, city, and in your state. We are living in a critical time. A final thought of how then shall we live? Psalm 11:3 asks the question, when the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? And Psalm 12:8 asks, the wicked freely strut about, when what is vile is honored among men. These two verses written by David describe the day in which we live here in America right now. Our constitutional biblical foundations are being rapidly destroyed right before our eyes, and it seems as if those who see and understand the great evil that is now accelerating our land are helpless to stop these things. And the frustration for those who do see and understand is that most of our friends, relatives, fellow workers, neighbors, attendees at our churches, even some of our pastors, can't see what is so obvious to us, cannot connect the dots. They can't see where these accelerating events are taking us. I wonder if it was like that right before empires or nations such as Rome, Carthage, Assyria, Persia, the Greek city-states, etc. I wonder if it was like that before they collapsed, or right before the evil empires or governments were being birthed. As in Russia in 1917, Germany in 1933, China in 1949, Cuba 1958, Iran in 1979, and now America in 2020. What were the great majority of people thinking right before the epic convulsions that they were about to take place? What were the remnant of right-thinking, freedom-loving, righteous people found in every declining nation or civilization doing, thinking, or feeling? These questions relative to our day, as we see the candle of freedom decency and righteousness flickering, and perhaps to go out, even in America. One thing is almost certain regarding those nations of the past, as in our nation today: the great majority were blind. They were oblivious to the tidal wave of evil that was about to overwhelm them. It was that way before the great floods of Noah's time, before the fall of Rome, before the Bolsheviks took power in Russia, or the Nazis were voted into power in Germany, and before the present evil took over our American government. Were we, the majority, blinded by prosperity? In part, sure. Were we all deceived? Definitely. Are we the Pollyannas who refuse to believe that anything bad could happen? And are they now in denial? Definitely. Indeed. Were the people blinded spiritually by the forces of darkness? Jesus said in his day, referring to the righteous leader who later had him crucified, "Seeing they cannot see, and hearing they cannot hear." Jesus is describing a period in Matthew, spoke of a great period of great wickedness, evil, deception, persecution of his followers, and spiritual conflict. Note that over the past year, close to 200,000 Christians have been martyred. That's violently murdered. That's the greatest number in history, folks. It seems that the collapse of great nations or empires, or the rise of evil powers, is always preceded by a time of great evil, debauchery, immorality, lying, deception, denial, corruption, spiritual blindness, delusion, and a turning away from the God of the Bible by the great majority. This describes Germany in the 1920s and early 30s. In Russia, Alexander Solzhenitsyn considered that the Bolshevik Revolution prevailed in 1917 and the people lost their freedom. Why? Because they forgot God. I believe with all my heart, all the hope and prayers that I can put up, that I'm wrong. But my very difficult times that we're seeing, folks, economically, financially, and politically, that they all lie immediately ahead for America. Are we prepared? Your spiritual preparation is the most important. Don't try to navigate through the minefield without God's help. Isaiah 41:13 says, "For I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand, and says to you, do not fear, I will help you." And Isaiah 43, 1b and 2 says, quote, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." In other words, folks, the Lord can take care of his followers, his kids. He can take care of us in the midst of the crisis or the storm. And folks, that is the good news. Aren't we glad that we have read the last chapter of the book? Today I want to ask you, take these words to heart. Prepare as you haven't done in the past, and may we all seek God's face. May we fall into prayer before a holy God and beg for his intervention in our country while the time is still here, while the lights are still on. And may we always remember, when these lights are dimmed, and if they are, the lights of freedom, of good civilizations, will be removed from this world. God bless until next week.